I need to tell you something that's been eating me alive for 3 years. And I swear on everything I love that every word of this is true. My name is Victoria, I'm 32 years old, and until that cursed night in September, I lived a life that most people would call a dream, but that I now know was nothing more than a beautiful nightmare wrapped in designer clothes and empty promises. The accident that took my legs wasn't just an accident, it was the price I paid for playing a game I should have never entered, and the person behind the wheel, well, that's where this story gets really complicated. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. If you're connecting with this story, if you feel like you need to know what happens next, please click that subscribe button right now. We're working towards 17,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Just hit that red button below. It takes 2 seconds and it helps more than you know. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years ago, I was living in Manhattan, working as a marketing consultant for a mid-sized firm in Midtown. The pay was decent, nothing spectacular, but enough to cover my studio apartment in Queens and my student loans. I was dating Marcus, a guy I'd met in college who worked in IT and spent most weekends playing video games with his friends online. We were comfortable, predictable, boring if I'm being honest. Every Friday was the same Chinese takeout, every Sunday the same brunch spot in Astoria. I told myself I was content, but deep down, something was screaming that this couldn't be all there was to life. Then I met Richard Ashford at a corporate event in the financial district. He was everything Marcus wasn't, older by 15 years, confident, successful, the kind of man who walked into a room and everyone immediately knew he mattered. He owned a private equity firm and had homes in the Hamptons, Miami, and somewhere in Colorado I can't even pronounce. When he approached me that night, champagne glass in hand, asking about the presentation I'd just given, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt seen. Our affair started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself. Coffee meetings that turned into lunch, lunch that became dinner, dinner that led to a hotel room overlooking Central Park where he told me I was wasting my beauty and intelligence on a life of mediocrity. He said he could show me a different world, a better world, and God help me, I wanted to see it. I wanted to taste it. I wanted to become it. If you're still with me, and I hope you are because this gets so much darker, do me a favor and hit subscribe. We're building a community here, a place where real stories get told without judgment, and we're so close to 17,000 subscribers. Your click matters. It really does. Just tap that button and let's keep going together. Breaking up with Marcus was easier than I expected and harder than I'd ever admit. He cried, asked me what he'd done wrong, begged me to go to couples therapy. I told him I needed space to find myself, which was partially true. I just left out the part about finding myself in Richard's penthouse and his king-sized bed and his world of private jets and charity galas where people wore watches that cost more than Marcus made in a year. Within 2 months, I'd moved into a luxury apartment in Chelsea that Richard paid for, left my consulting job, and become what he called his companion. What everyone else called me, well, I tried not to think about that. The lifestyle was intoxicating. Shopping on Fifth Avenue without looking at price tags, weekend trips to Paris because Richard had a sudden craving for authentic croissants, front row seats to Broadway shows, tables at restaurants where reservations were booked 6 months in advance. He bought me a Mercedes, a silver convertible that I drove through the city feeling like I owned the world. My Instagram transformed into this curated fantasy of champagne breakfasts and sunset views from rooftops most people would never access. Old friends from college would comment with fire emojis and jealous messages, and I'd smile, knowing they had no idea what any of this really cost. But Richard was married. Of course he was married. 30 years to Catherine, his college sweetheart, mother of his 3 children who were all in their 20s and probably older than the age gap between us felt comfortable admitting. He told me the marriage was dead, that they stayed together for appearances and business connections, that Catherine knew about his arrangements and had her own life. He said he'd leave her eventually, when the timing was right, when his youngest daughter finished grad school, when the next acquisition closed, when. I pretended to believe him because believing was easier than facing what I'd become. The guilt was constant, like a low-grade fever I couldn't shake. I'd see couples walking hand in hand in Washington Square Park and remember Sunday mornings with Marcus, How simple and honest everything had been. I'd watch romantic comedies alone in my expensive apartment and cry into pillows that cost more than my first car. Sometimes I'd draft text messages to Marcus apologizing, explaining, begging for forgiveness, but I never sent them. What would I even say? Sorry I traded you for designer handbags and a man who sees me as a beautiful accessory? Here's where I need you to do something for me. If this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling the weight of these choices along with me, please take a second and click subscribe. We're pushing towards 17,000 subscribers, and every single one of you matters in building this community. Just hit that button. It's free, it's easy, and it helps more than you know. Thank you, truly. The first major crack in my gilded cage came about 8 months into the arrangement. I was at the apartment, Richard's apartment technically, waiting for him to arrive for dinner when I decided to charge my phone using the cable he kept in his nightstand. That's when I found the other phone, a burner, cheap and basic, hidden under some documents. My hands were shaking as I powered it on, and what I found made my blood run cold. Messages to at least 4 other women, similar arrangements, similar promises, similar apartments probably scattered across different neighborhoods. One girl was 23, a dancer in Brooklyn. Another was a graduate student at Columbia. There were others. I was not special. I was not unique. I was one of several investments in his portfolio of pretty distractions. When Richard arrived that night, I confronted him with the evidence, screaming accusations while tears ruined the makeup I'd spent an hour perfecting. He didn't deny anything. He just poured himself a scotch, loosened his tie, and told me I was being dramatic. He said I knew what this was from the beginning, that I'd benefited enormously from his generosity, that if I wasn't happy with the arrangement, there were plenty of other women who would be grateful for the opportunity. His words hit me like physical blows, each one exposing the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't his companion. I wasn't even his mistress. I was a transaction, a luxury he could afford and replace as easily as he'd replace a watch or a car. I should have left that night. I should have packed my things, called Marcus and begged him to forgive me, found a way to rebuild my actual life instead of living in this hollow fantasy. But I didn't. The apartment lease was in Richard's name. My Mercedes was registered to his company. My credit cards were connected to his accounts. Somewhere along the way, I'd become completely financially dependent on a man who saw me as disposable. The golden cage had a lock, and I'd helped him turn the key. So I stayed, but something fundamental had broken. I started drinking more, wine at lunch, cocktails in the afternoon, anything to numb the self-loathing that followed me like a shadow. I'd stand in my walk-in closet surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of clothes and feel absolutely nothing. The Instagram posts continued, but they felt like maintaining a lie, performing happiness for an audience that didn't know the woman behind the filtered photos was drowning in shame and regret. If you're invested in what happens next, and I really hope you are because this is about to take a turn nobody saw coming, please click that subscribe button. We're working so hard to reach 17,000 subscribers, and you can be part of that milestone. Just one click. That's all it takes. Help us grow this community where real, messy, complicated stories get shared. Please, hit subscribe now. Then I met Catherine, Richard's wife, and everything I thought I knew about my situation shattered completely. It happened at a charity gala in the meatpacking district, one of those events where Manhattan's elite gather to write checks and feel good about themselves. Richard had told me Catherine would be traveling, that I could attend as his date without complications. He lied, obviously, because lying was as natural to him as breathing. I saw her across the room, elegant in a navy gown, her silver hair styled perfectly, diamonds at her throat that probably cost more than every gift Richard had ever given me combined. She was holding court with a group of women, laughing at something, and she looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't felt in months. Then her eyes met mine, and I watched her face shift from polite interest to knowing recognition. She knew exactly who I was. Catherine approached me with a calm I found terrifying, introduced herself as if we were just 2 guests at the same event, and suggested we step outside for some air. My heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it, but I followed her to a balcony overlooking the Hudson River. The September air was crisp, and I remember thinking how strange it was to be having this conversation with the Manhattan skyline glittering behind us like we were in some twisted romantic drama. She didn't yell or make a scene. She just looked at me with these sad, tired eyes and said, "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." She told me about the others, the pattern Richard had followed for years, young women he'd seduce with promises and luxury, use until he got bored, then discard with a severance payment and a non-disclosure agreement. She told me about the first one she discovered 15 years ago, how she'd almost left him, how he'd cried and sworn it would never happen again. She'd believed him then, just like I'd believed his promises about leaving her. But here's where the story gets complicated in ways I never expected. Catherine started asking me questions, about my life before Richard, about what I wanted, about who I'd been before I'd agreed to become his secret. And I found myself opening up to this woman I should have hated, telling her things I'd never told anyone, about the suffocating predictability of my old life, about feeling invisible and ordinary, about wanting desperately to matter to someone. She listened without judgment, just nodding occasionally, and when I finally stopped talking, she said something that changed everything. "He destroys women like us," Catherine said softly, "not because he's evil, but because he genuinely doesn't understand that we're real people with real feelings. To him, we're all just beautiful things to collect and display. But you and I, Victoria, we could destroy him instead." I want to pause here and ask you something. Are you seeing where this is going? Do you have theories about what Catherine was proposing? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and please, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We're so close to 17,000 subscribers, and this community is everything to me. Your support, your engagement, it makes all of this worthwhile. Subscribe now, please. Catherine's plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. She'd been gathering evidence for years, documenting Richard's affairs, his financial manipulations, the way he'd used company funds to support his lifestyle and his mistresses. She had lawyers ready, accountants who'd identified discrepancies, a network of other wives who'd suffered similar betrayals and were ready to come forward. All she needed was one of Richard's current companions to testify, to provide the human face to the story, to stand up in court and in the media and expose exactly what kind of man Richard Ashford really was. In exchange, she offered me immunity, protection, a financial settlement that would set me up for years, and most importantly, a way out of the cage I'd locked myself into. She'd already helped 2 of Richard's previous women, setting them up with new identities, new cities, new lives far away from his influence. She could do the same for me, but first, I had to help her take him down completely. I should have been shocked by how calculating she was, how she'd turned her pain into a weapon, but instead I felt something like admiration. Here was a woman who'd been betrayed repeatedly, humiliated by her husband's public infidelities, and instead of playing the victim, she decided to become the architect of his destruction. She wasn't asking for my help out of sisterhood or revenge, she was offering me a transaction, which somehow felt more honest than anything Richard had ever given me. I agreed that night on the balcony overlooking the river, and for the next 3 weeks, Catherine and I became unlikely allies. We'd meet at her lawyer's office in Brooklyn, going through financial documents, preparing my testimony, building the case that would expose Richard's fraud and infidelity to his business partners, his children, and the world. I felt powerful for the first time in months, like I was finally taking control of my own story instead of being a supporting character in someone else's drama. But Richard wasn't stupid, and I wasn't as careful as I thought. He'd hired a private investigator who'd been following me, photographing my meetings with Catherine, reporting back on every conversation, every document I touched. When he confronted me in the apartment 3 weeks after that charity gala, his rage was cold and controlled, which somehow made it more frightening than if he'd yelled. "You ungrateful little fool," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what I can do to you? I made you. Everything you have, everything you are, you owe to me. And you think you can betray me? You think you can conspire with my bitter, jealous wife to ruin me? Before I continue, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. We're building towards 17,000 subscribers, and I need you to be part of this journey. This story gets darker, more complicated, more impossible, and I need to know you're with me. Please, just click subscribe. It matters more than you know. Richard told me I had 24 hours to end my cooperation with Catherine, destroy any evidence I'd copied, and sign a new non-disclosure agreement that would legally prevent me from ever speaking about our relationship. If I refused, he'd release a file he'd compiled on me, photographs that had been manipulated to make me look like I'd been blackmailing him, forged documents suggesting I'd stolen money from his accounts, testimonials from women he'd paid to claim I'd threatened them. He'd destroy my reputation so completely that nobody would ever believe my side of the story. I was trapped, paralyzed by fear and the sickening realization that I'd underestimated how far Richard would go to protect himself. I called Catherine from a burner phone, told her about Richard's threats, and I could hear the resignation in her voice when she responded. "He's done this before," she said. "The last woman who tried to testify against him ended up losing everything, her career, her credibility, her family. He's very good at making people disappear, not literally, but socially, professionally, completely." That night, I made the worst decision of my life, a decision that would cost me everything in ways I never imagined. I packed a bag with essentials, grabbed what cash I could find in the apartment, and decided to run. No testimony, no cooperation, no taking down Richard or saving anyone else. Just survival, just getting out, just disappearing before he could destroy me completely. I'd head upstate, maybe to Buffalo or Rochester, somewhere Richard's influence didn't reach, somewhere I could start over with a new name and a new story. I left the apartment at 2 in the morning, threw my bag in the Mercedes, and started driving north on the Taconic Parkway. It was raining, that heavy September rain that makes the road slick and visibility almost zero, but I didn't care. I just needed distance, needed to put miles between myself and the mess I'd created. I was crying so hard I could barely see, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind racing through everything I'd lost, Marcus, my career, my self-respect, any chance at a normal, honest life. I didn't see the other car until it was too late. It came out of nowhere, crossing the median, headlights blinding me through the rain. I swerved instinctively, felt the Mercedes hydroplane, watched in surreal slow motion as the world tilted and spun. The sound of metal crunching, glass shattering, my own screaming, then nothing but darkness and pain so intense I thought I was dying. When I woke up 3 days later in Albany Medical Center, Catherine was sitting beside my hospital bed. Not Richard, not my family who I'd barely spoken to in months, but Catherine, this woman whose husband I'd been sleeping with, whose life I'd been a destructive part of. She looked older than I remembered, tired and sad, and when she saw me wake up, she started crying. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and I didn't understand why she was apologizing. Then the doctor came in, young and professional, and told me what I'd already started to suspect from the strange emptiness I felt below my waist. The accident had been catastrophic. They'd had to amputate both my legs below the knee to save my life. There had been no choice, no alternative. I would live, but I would never walk the same way again. I need you to pause with me here. Take a breath. I know this is heavy, I know this is dark, but I need you to stay with me because we're not done yet. If you're still here, if you're feeling this story in your chest, please click subscribe. We're pushing towards 17,000 subscribers, and your support keeps me going. Just hit that button. Please. We're in this together now. The investigation into the accident revealed something that still keeps me up at night. The other car that crossed the median, the one that caused me to crash, had been registered to one of Richard's shell companies. The driver was never identified, never found, and the car had been reported stolen 3 hours before the accident occurred. The police ruled it as a tragic coincidence, an unfortunate case of a stolen vehicle and bad weather and wrong place, wrong time. But Catherine didn't believe in coincidences, and neither did I. She hired her own investigators who uncovered something terrifying. Richard had known I was planning to run. His private detective had tracked me leaving the apartment, had followed me onto the parkway, had called someone with instructions. The accident wasn't an accident at all. It was a message, a warning, or maybe an attempt to silence me permanently that had only partially succeeded. Catherine wanted to go to the police with this evidence, wanted to pursue criminal charges for attempted murder, but her lawyers advised against it. Richard's connections ran deep, judges and prosecutors and people who owed him favors. Without concrete proof, without the driver or the stolen car or anything beyond circumstantial evidence, any accusation would look like the desperate conspiracy theory of a bitter wife and a scorned mistress. We'd be the ones who ended up looking crazy, vindictive, untrustworthy. So here I am, 3 years later, living in a modest apartment in Portland, Oregon, far away from Manhattan and Richard and the life I used to live. Catherine helped me relocate, set me up with enough money to survive, paid for my prosthetics and physical therapy and the psychiatric care I needed to process everything that happened. She visits sometimes, and we've become something like friends, bonded by trauma and shared experience and the knowledge that we both loved and hated the same terrible man. Richard is still in Manhattan, still running his private equity firm, still married to Catherine because she decided not to pursue the divorce after what happened to me. She says she's gathering more evidence, building a stronger case, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But I think she's just tired, worn down by years of fighting a man who always seems to be 3 steps ahead. His other companions disappeared quietly, paid off or threatened into silence, and the world keeps spinning like none of it ever happened. I don't post on Instagram anymore. My old account is still there, frozen in time, showing a woman who doesn't exist anymore smiling in front of expensive restaurants and designer stores. Sometimes I scroll through those photos and barely recognize myself, that girl who thought luxury could fill the emptiness inside her, who traded authenticity for accessories and ended up paying a price she never imagined. The phantom pain is the worst part, my brain insisting that I can still feel my feet, my toes, parts of me that are gone forever. It's a fitting metaphor for the whole experience, grieving for versions of myself and my life that no longer exist, that maybe never really existed at all. I see couples holding hands on the street and I think about Marcus, wonder what his life is like now, whether he ever thinks about me or if he's moved on completely. I hope he has. He deserves better than what I gave him, better than the lies and betrayal and the girl who chose money over love. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you one more time. Please, if this story has moved you, if you felt something real while listening, click that subscribe button. We're so close to 17,000 subscribers, and building this community matters. Your subscription is free, it takes 2 seconds, and it means everything. Please, hit subscribe right now. So now you know everything, or almost everything. You know about the affair, the luxury, the addiction to a lifestyle I couldn't afford or sustain. You know about Catherine and the plan that failed, about Richard and the accident that wasn't an accident, about the legs I lost and the life I'll never get back. You know more about me than anyone except Catherine, more than my family who I fed careful lies about a car accident upstate, more than the few friends I've made in Portland who know me as Victoria, the quiet woman with prosthetics who works remotely as a freelance writer. But here's what I haven't told you, what keeps me up at night 3 years later, what makes me question everything I think I know about that September night on the Taconic Parkway. 2 months ago, I received an envelope with no return address, postmarked from Manhattan. Inside was a single photograph, taken from a distance, showing me leaving a physical therapy appointment here in Portland. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, was a message that made my blood run cold. You're welcome for letting you live. Stay quiet, stay hidden, and you'll stay safe. Start talking again, and next time, there won't be enough left to save. I showed the photograph to Catherine during her last visit, and I watched her face go pale. She asked if I'd been contacted by any journalists, any lawyers, anyone asking about Richard or our relationship. I said no, but that was a lie. 3 weeks before the photograph arrived, a reporter from the New York Times had reached out, said she was working on an investigation into Richard's business practices and had heard rumors about his personal life. She wanted to interview me, wanted my story to be part of a larger exposé about powerful men who abuse their positions and the women who pay the price. I told her no. I said I had nothing to say, that she had the wrong person, that I'd never even heard of Richard Ashford. Then I changed my phone number and tried to forget about it. But the photograph suggests that Richard knows about the reporter's interest, knows that I was contacted, and is reminding me of the consequences of speaking up. Catherine thinks I should talk to the reporter, that this might be our chance to finally expose Richard with the protection of a major news organization and public scrutiny. She says we have more evidence now, more women willing to come forward, more financial irregularities that suggest Richard's entire empire might be built on fraud and manipulation. She says this could be justice finally, for everything he's done to both of us and all the others. But I look at my prosthetic legs every morning when I wake up, and I remember the pain, the fear, the months of rehabilitation, the life I lost. And I think about what might happen if I speak up again, if I break my silence and Richard decides to finish what he started on that rainy September night. I think about whether any amount of justice is worth risking my life, whether revenge or truth or whatever you want to call it matters more than survival. So I'm asking you, everyone who's listened to this story, everyone who's stayed with me through the darkness and the pain and the impossible choices, what would you do in my place? Would you speak to the reporter and risk everything to expose a man who's destroyed countless lives? Would you stay silent and safe, living with the knowledge that Richard will keep hurting other women because nobody has the courage to stop him? Would you try to find some middle ground, some way to seek justice without putting yourself directly in his crosshairs? I genuinely don't know the answer. Part of me wants to burn Richard's world down, to see him lose everything the way I lost everything, to watch his empire crumble and his reputation destroyed and his freedom taken away. But another part of me, the part that still wakes up screaming from nightmares about the accident, just wants to stay hidden in Portland, living my quiet life, surviving instead of fighting. The reporter has contacted me twice more since I changed my number, finding new ways to reach me, leaving messages that promise protection and legal support and the power of public exposure. She says Richard's going down either way, with or without my testimony, but that my story could be the piece that makes everything else credible. She says I have a responsibility to the other women, to the future victims, to use my voice while I still can. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story, my truth, my mess of a life that I'm still trying to understand and survive. Before you go, please click that subscribe button one last time. We're working so hard to reach 17,000 subscribers, and your support means I can keep telling these stories, keep sharing these truths that nobody else wants to talk about. Just hit subscribe. Be part of this community. Please. I need to decide soon. The reporter's deadline is next week, and Catherine is flying out to help me make the choice. But before I decide, I wanted to tell all of you, to put my story out into the world in my own words, on my own terms. Maybe someone out there has been through something similar. Maybe someone has wisdom I don't have. Maybe someone can tell me if justice is worth dying for, or if survival is its own kind of victory. So I'm turning this over to you now. What would you do in my place? Would you speak up or stay silent? Would you risk everything for the chance to take down a man who's hurt so many? Or would you protect the life you've rebuilt from the ashes of the old one? Tell me in the comments. Guide me. Help me figure out if I'm a coward for wanting to hide or smart for protecting myself or brave for even considering going public again. This is my story, but the ending hasn't been written yet. Maybe you can help me decide how it ends. What would you do in my place?